Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Bestie Man.
Digi-Nay. And we're here to talk about REEEEEing, episodes 5 through 8.
Hi there! Mind if I join you?
It's a whole new world now. That's it.
And you can also support the show through Subscribestar to get our bonus episodes.
$10, bonus content, it's coming. Will already be out by now, probably.
Enough about that.
Yeah.
REEEEEing, episodes 5 through 8 was about the maids, the very famous characters, Rem and Ram. They were already pretty popular when I watched the show for the first time, but they have persisted as, like, the biggest, like, marketing characters in anime since this show came out 4 years ago.
That may well be true. I had not been aware that the show was getting continued until you told me about it, and we decided to do this. Yeah, I mean, clearly these two are like the poster children for manga volume 2 or light novel volume 2.
Yeah.
And we are no longer spending most of our time on like the mechanics and doing time loop stuff. Now it's like time to learn about these new characters. Yeah. And frankly, I guess it paid off for the author because these characters are beloved and everybody loves them.
You spend a lot of time in this place. And the first time that I watched the show, I did it in a marathon. And, you know, I was pretty critical of this arc because of the fact that it is just so incredibly slow. It feels like you're never going to leave this mansion.
It does feel that way.
Because the whole 4 episodes are all in this one mansion, and it does not fully resolve the arc of Rem and Ram.
Yep.
Like, the whole next arc is also about them. So, like,
they have given us enough breadcrumbs. We know where it's going. We know that there's a larger villain. It's a shaman or something. These two will be. I mean, it's a little weird because on the one hand, they're clearly trying to make us love these two. Subaru is explicitly like, I love these two, they were good to me, yet they both attempt to murder him and successfully murder him in one instance, and I would argue that goes against the whole them being good people.
Yeah.
I'd say you only when killing people for very good reasons, which they did not have in these situations, I would categorize that under bad person, personally.
I would say that it might be more fair to say that they have the potential to be good people, that he recognizes.
And don't we all?
Them.
And don't we all at the end of the day? Okay, all right.
I do think that's maybe this show on some level, that seems to be the thinking of, at the very least, Subaru and Amelia. I think that's what, like, they both are the type of people who are just like, I would put myself absolutely out there for anybody who shows that they are good at all. You know, like, if you treat Subaru nice, because his mentality is literally, these two girls touched my hands, like, while killing me, or something, like,
well, like,
before
they made a decision one way or another. Like, to help him because he felt all fucked up the first night he was there, he was being healed, they comforted him in his time of need, so he knows there's good in there.
Right. So
even though they try to kill him later, and do so.
Yeah, so he's like, the fact that they are even capable of the level of empathy to hold my hands means that I must protect them.
You know, there is an interesting point being made there I hadn't really thought about, and it kind of is like through the mind of a child. But on the other hand, well, it's like when you're dealing with time loop, time travel type stories, you get to the point, the logical conclusion of everything is like, life kind of loses meaning. Nothing means anything. Anything could be anybody, and no particular person really matters at the end of the day. And that's kind of like life. Nothing has objective, pure meaning, but you can ascribe meaning to it. And in a similar way, I actually, now that I'm reflecting on it, I do like that there are no grand answers for us in life, so why not take the most positive approach that gives you, like, purpose and meaning in life, such as every person I meet on my weird time travel shenanigan, yes, they can turn out to be evil and murder me, but I will choose to take the effort and exact the labor to, like, make the good ending happen where these people turn out good. And on that sense, I kind of respect it. Even though, I would argue, as we were saying before, this is the low IQ option. Sometimes the low IQ option is the right one.
Well, you know, it's funny. You just now made me realize why my light novel, Kusamega, is so similar to ReEeEEing. And it's because in my light novel, the main character tells the goddess, like, I have, like, no other ideas of, like, what to live for, but since you believe in me, I'm just going to live for you.
Okay.
And, like, that's my thing. And so, like, he starts off the book having killed himself right before that. So it's like, the character's already at 0, you know, like, he already has killed himself before, would do it again, you know, but hey, as long as as long as there's some chance I can protect this goddess and, you know, save the universe in the process, I guess.
He's finding meaning in a new world.
We'll just keep coming back. And, like, with Subaru, it's similar with, like, his motivation is, well, this world isn't all bad because Amelia's here. And every time he thinks, like, I can't fucking do it anymore, like, my mind is broken, I've become because probably my favorite part of this whole arc is in episode 8, the sort of emotional climax is where he's gotten to the point where he, like, thinks he can make it through, he understands what to do, but, like, he's overexerting himself trying to make as much happen as possible and, like, work really hard and be nice to everybody, but it's, like, because he's trying to do it, it's no longer natural, and these people don't know who he is in this time cycle. So, like, you know, he should be able to just casually jab with them because he knows them and he knows what they're like, but because it's so forced and put on, they're all kind of confused by it. They're like, well, you seem friendly, you seem to know what I'm about, but why are you acting this way, you know? And then, like, Amelia just lets him rest his head in her lap. And when you think about where she's at in his time cycle, it's like, in her mind, she's known this guy for, like, 2 days. But he saved her. Yeah. And she just, like, no matter how, like, crazy he's acting, she thinks of it like, okay, well, I know this is a good guy. He just seems like he's frazzled. Let me just give him I bet if he laid in my lap, he would feel better, you know, and he fucking loses his shit crying. And, it's just like, as he puts it at one point, like, no matter how many loops I go through, she's always the same person. She's always just as kind. Because she got the green, gem from the little girl in the first arc.
Well, she got the flower. She got the flower, proving that even when he wasn't involved, she still did the same kind act. Yeah.
So, like, so she does that here, even though, like, in his mind, like, he even says, like, what did I do to deserve this? You know, because, like, while he from his perspective, he's been with her, like, 4 times longer, and still, even in context of his own mind, probably would not have ever seen it coming that he'd get to put his head in her lap, you know, that she would actually do this. But, like, in this timeline where she barely even knows him, she's willing to go that far for him just because she knows it will help, you know. So, like, that I thought was one of the more powerful scenes, especially because I have been in that scenario of, like, trying to do too much, going into, like, just such a hyper drive of false confidence, like, posturing, basically, as a way of being, like, because there's a strong element with Subaru of it's all about positive thinking. It's all about positive mentality. Get over it as quickly as possible. Get back in the action. And there are very subtle moments where they show him, like, flipping the switch. There's a great one where the little cat uses the blinding spell on him.
Yeah.
And he's, like, fucking freaking out, and like it looks terrible. This is a great scene visually because there's nothing communicated in dialogue.
We felt how fucked up it would feel to be in this situation. It kind of reminds me of, like, in My Hero Academia, when Lemillion's power of losing all sensation of pass through things is described. It is described like a nightmare realm, but he has to do that, like, every time he uses his superpower to do heroic stuff.
But we didn't even have to have that explained. We felt it through the animation, which is like honestly noteworthy, I think, you know. But,
I agree.
But there's a great moment when he wakes up from the spell and, like, you see him from behind, and one of the, like, he's just, like, facing down at the water, like he had almost walked into this pool. And then they ask, like, are you okay? And there's a super close-up of his mouth, just like, and then he's like, yeah, I'm fine. It's like, obviously he was fucking haunted. Like, that was really awful, whatever he just experienced. But he's like, he immediately snaps back. And so it's not until he's literally, like, given permission to stop, like, told, like, hey, sit down. Be quiet. Come lay down, you know, like, and then she says, like, it was painful, wasn't it, or something. And it's just like, all of it comes crashing out of him.
That was a
very humane moment, very intimate in a way that is just not common in anime. Like,
this was by far the best emotional moment, I think, of the show so far, and I'm starting to see why people connect with this. Because, you know, I was saying, like, last episode that, like, I was afraid it feels edgy just for the sake of edginess, but now they really are starting to capture the emotional side of how you really, I would feel deeply disturbed by repeatedly dying over and over, experiencing those horrific acts, and then waking up and realizing like all your hard work's been undone and you have to do all these things over and failing. And I mean, the new thing that we're experiencing here is that realizing that like the people around you, depending on your actions, who you thought of as friends, will actually be the ones who kill you, which makes it puts it all on you. It feels like how like there is no one to empathize. He attempts in this little arc to tell people about what's going on with him, and he physically can't due to some curse or whatever. So he can't even confide even if he wants to. So he's forced to be completely alone in this little quest, and his friends can become enemies at the drop of a hat. And you know, it actually reminds me, speaking of, you know, as we get to this point, for the first time in this little arc, he intentionally commits suicide. And it takes a whole bunch of, like, building up to it. It reminds me, actually, this very morning, I was out trying to surf. And I was surfing on waves that were way too big for me. And I'm not going to say I nearly died, but I did experience death visions briefly as like a big like 5-foot wave just toppled me back, and I got a decent amount of ocean water in my
Decent
gut.
amount of ego death.
And, you know, when you feel the life draining out of your limbs as you're struggling back, I made it back. I did survive. But I looking back at this episode, experiencing death, I feel a little bit like Subaru in this episode. And, you know, actually it was kind of weird. Watching his emotion in that scene kind of brought me back to this morning.
Wow.
And it was pretty fucked up in my head.
You got triggered.
I got a little bit of shakes going on. Anyway, it's not about me. This is about anime. Far more interesting than my near-death experience. It just helped me connect with the character more, or at least, hey, what's art supposed to do? Make you reflect on your life and think about fucked up and or good things that happen to you. And it, you know, they're doing a pretty good job with the, what do they call it? The weird lens angles, the warp shit, all that kind of mouth motion.
I really think what they nailed even more than anything is just the facial expressions in this show, because so I've been rewatching Shirobako, and there's a scene where they're kind of talking about like how these days a lot of faces are literally templates. You know, they just slap the same face on there. They have their sets of expressions, and they will do unique expressions, you know, when necessary, or in like a Sakuga scene or something. But like this show goes out of its way to have tons of like really unique, really emotive expressions where the characters' faces get ugly.
That's the heart. That's the heart coming through.
Faces get ugly. The guys' faces get ugly, but they don't.
They call that soul, by the way. They call that soul.
Right. And just like I feel like Subaru in particular, because the girls, they have their moments where they show an emotive face. Mostly they look like cute girls all
I
the
do
time.
enjoy the dramatic moment, I think, earlier on, when, like, for the first time you see Ram, the blue one, when we see the flutter, as we see her second eye. I'm like, this is good. I like that. When you hide something, and then you reveal it in an emotional moment, that's a good way to make an audience say, that's my waifu.
Exactly.
So I'm starting to understand.
But yeah, I feel like with Subaru, they put a lot of work into that boy's face. Every time he's acting, he's got new expressions. He's got, you know, just like weird, unique, funny ones. There's one where he looks like a little beak mouth, you know. Like,
I was thinking, early on, my thinking was that, like, he looks a little weird compared to the other characters. His eye shape is strange and his eyes are small. But I think that the reason for that is because they want to do the, like, eye shrink and all these effects. And he actually, the characters say in text or, you know, in their voice, they're like, you have scary eyes. I'm like, this means nothing to me. I don't know what you mean. But then they actually do animate him to be distinctly creepy looking at times with that face, and I'm like, now I'm seeing it.
I definitely think there's an undercurrent in this show, and I don't know if this is going to be explored at some point, of like, Subaru seems like somebody who has already been abused a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah. We need to learn his backstory. What happened to this boy? Right,
because he's already had to develop this mentality that he has of just like pick back up and go. He's full of determination. He's just that heart coming together constantly, you know, the Undertale heart.
Yes, he is.
But like his the way that he sort of grovels instantly as well, that like his mentality of how to get out of a situation is just like debase yourself, because if you look weak, they'll leave you alone. But he's not weak. Like, it's a tactic that he understands. He knows how to do this.
I was thinking it's a bad look And this happened
Yeah.
when Emilia is explaining to him, like, bro, you're never gonna smash this fat pussy if you just keep apologizing.
Right.
Instead, just say thank you.
That was a
and
great scene.
I'll like you more, is basically what she's saying.
I'm with somebody who apologizes constantly for no reason. So
Drop him.
I was like,
drop him. Get out of there.
I was
It's
like,
time to cut and run.
I was like, oh, I can't wait to quote this line. But yeah, just like she says,
That was- I mean, that's good
thank you
advice.
is more satisfying than 100 sorries.
I would give any an inconfident person that very same advice.
Yeah, but there's a scene where when he wakes up after having been killed by Rem, and like he wakes up and he's in complete shock after overseeing the maids. He's like freaking out and they're all scared, and then he realizes like the situation. So what he does is just like do the most cringy, ridiculous pose possible, so that he looks, like, oh, I'm not threatening, I'm crazy, and they're like,
That's his cope.
Right. But it's like, he's like that all the time because he doesn't know anything else to be. Like, he only knows how to be cringy, and that is useful sometimes, not useful most of the time, So most of the time, he's trying his hardest to learn to be useful. He wants to learn something, and there's a line in episode 5 where Ram basically breaks down how all of society works. She says to him, you learn how to do something, and then I won't have to do as much. This is how you become useful.
Mutually beneficial relationships.
If you do not, to my viewers, if you do not feel useful in your life, learn how to do something so you can do it for someone else, so they don't have to do it, and then they are freed up to do what they do want to do. And then everybody shares the load. That's the basis
specialization of labor
Yes.
that allows a society to grow and people to like you more if you have something to offer.
So yeah, that's basically what she tells him. Learn to do something, and so he's like, I'm gonna learn to do stuff, and he's only got a few days really, but he just fucking grinds at it. Everything that they tell him to do, he sucks at it, but he just practices until he's good enough to do something.
When he snapped at the end for that big emotional scene, and he said, like, I've never worked this hard at anything in my life. I mean, on the one hand, that is a powerful statement. I believe him. He seems to really be committed to that. He's not exaggerating. I mean, it's life or death now, so he has no choice, basically. But then also, it just, again, triggers my, like, okay, if he's saying he's never worked this hard at anything, his life back on Earth or whatever can't have been, like, a life or death struggle every day. It must have been some sort of, like, general, maybe there's some money my parents left me when they died, but, like, I have to make sure long-term I put in work to keep the family afloat or something. I don't know exactly what it is.
He was a NEET. He was just working out all the time.
Yeah,
at home.
yeah.
So like,
I just mean there's something that he was responsible for, it feels like. I don't know what.
I think we might learn that he had like a brother or something like that.
Who died?
later.
That'd be my guess. Because he failed
remember.
him or something. I don't know.
So, yeah, and he has this whole thing where he knows how to project being like shit. But I think where his strength comes from when he gets into a few cycles is that Subaru also understands that like people will trust you if you just like tell them a good story. If you just like tell them a reason to trust you, because he gets really good at like once he understands the situation, just like going for it, just telling people what to do, and people treat him very differently based on this. And I think like my favorite like thematic kind of backdrop throughout this arc was there's a part where they go to the village and there's these kids who are all like they're all over Subaru. They love him. They jump all over him. They just like rub snot on him. They beat the shit out of him. They're just like, yeah, this guy's our punching bag basically, and they love that, right? And so
they're way into it.
As they're leaving the village, he's telling Ram, he's like, yeah, kids have always thought I was cool. And
that seems like a positive. It seems like that's like, oh, he's great with kids.
But it's like, but they just generally like kick my ass, basically.
It's that he has no spine and he just lets them run all over him.
And so he says something like, they don't really respect me. And she says something like, have you done anything to show that you are someone worthy of respect? You know?
Yeah.
And like, all you have to do in real life to make people respect you is just insist that you are someone to be respected. Like, if you just walk into a place and say, like, I own this place, like the people who work there who might not even know whether you actually own the place might literally treat you like you own the place, and that's kind of what he starts doing as he gets into his later rounds. Is he's just like, I know these people well enough to know what I can say that will make them let me do what I want, And it's like, that wasn't something he naturally knew at the start, but once he like gets a sense of the people and the social structure, he can do it. Which once again brings me to my whole this is a metaphor for autism thing, because it's that he has no, partially because he's in a new world, but like he has no understanding of the social structure around him. Everybody else cares a lot about rank. They always say like, oh, you're a higher rank than me, or you're not a higher rank.
Sure.
And the maids in particular are very like, when they think that he is lowly, much like the children, they, in his first go-round, like, because they think he's just some guy who literally asks to work at the mansion. Like, when he is given a rich and powerful man in a magic mansion tells him, I will grant you any wish, and he says, I want to work here. And it's only days later that one of them says, well, you know, you could have just said... I think it's not even until his second revolution, after he's asked to do that again, that someone points out you could have just asked to stay here.
You might be right.
And
yeah,
we would have
something like that.
And we would have just taken care of you instead of you working. He had not considered this because his desire is to be useful, not to be taken care of, you know? So, like, when he does get to a timeline where he just demands to live there, the maids treat him completely differently. They won't talk to him, they won't commiserate with him because they think he's higher ranked than them. They think he's more worthy of respect, so they don't know how to communicate with him because the way that they communicate is they bully. And there's a scene where Ram comes into his room in like the last arc or something, or last rotation, and she's just like saying mean shit to him, and he's like, I can't believe you, like, your level of insolence as a maid. And she says, well, you told me to be nice to you. And it's like, this is her idea of being nice to him, and this is also his idea of someone being nice to him, because, as they put it, only a real pervert is comforted by being insulted. It's something that Ram says to him at one point. And yeah, he literally is comforted by being insulted.
Well, it means you're not being put on a weird pedestal. You're one of the boys in that situation.
And you are being expected to carry your weight. And he wants to be expected to do that. Even if he can't, he wants to be held to that standard so that he will constantly get better, constantly improve. So it's like he kind of has the right mindset, you know, and...
He kind of stumbles into the most useful way because of his just general good-naturedness and hard-working attitude, even though, like he could optimize his situation more if he was more like Machiavellian. Right. That's just not his nature by default. So, like, he's a good guy. He's your average... Well, not average, perhaps, but, like, he is a good-natured, like, normal protagonist guy. This is the usual superpower, the power of friendship kind of thing. He's just such a good guy. It's the way your harem protagonist has to be unremarkable so that we, the viewer, can relate to them, but also needs a superpower. Power of friendship is the catch-all. That's the get-out-of-jail-free superpower, and he has a bit of that, at least.
Well, and I think also part of it is, like, cheap taste, because he, at one point... he, like, invites Amelia on a date, and he's like, there's a really cute dog in the village, and the kids are great, and we can look at a field of flowers, you know? Like, this is his pitch to a princess for a date.
Yeah.
Super romantic, in a way, because he's just somebody who is impressed with everything. It's like, anything that looks cool,
I've
he's
heard
like,
worse
whoa,
approaches
flowers.
than that.
I mean, I feel the same way. Like, I vibe with him on this level, because I'm the type of person who, like, you know, my idea of, like, having a fun time in the city is literally just walking around the city, like just walking blocks around the city, you know, like not actually going to anywhere, just looking at buildings, you know. So like I like that about him, and I think it's charming that like Amelia has no like she doesn't even question that. She doesn't even stop and say like, oh haha, this is your idea. Like she's just like, yeah, that sounds like fun. Like they're totally on the same page. And only I, as a viewer, was left to think about the fact that, like, his date idea is to look at a dog, you know?
Yeah, and this is why Amelia, while is obviously objectively, like, nice and good, is also boring, because she's static. There's nothing to learn there. I'm sure she'll have some ancient princess backstory, but that's, like, plot relevant, that's not, like, personality relevant.
That's the thing that continually... This show is... The most frustrating thing about it is, again, it's very slow, and... It's definitely deliberate, because I feel like this is a story that had to have been pretty much planned to, like, all the way out, you know? Like, maybe not the specifics of each book, but I'm thinking
you hope that that's the case, but then you fear that they were making up as they go along, which entirely could be the case, as we know it is many times in situations like this.
It's just because there's, like, it's so... There's like a lot of secondary characters who get a lot of surprising use in the story.
Yeah.
That makes me think that like there's a sense of how all these people are connected and what they're all gonna mean in the long run. Because there's too many characters who are like they return, or like they run away. They're not just here for this one arc. So, and like there's all these hints about the witch and all this stuff. So I feel like this author probably like came up with the whole mythology and like the general idea of what was going to happen at the start, and then maybe like book by book just comes up with all the dialogue and stuff to like connect the dots. Okay, like what is this arc going to, how is this one going to play out, you know? Because each arc is almost like a mystery, like a closed room mystery story in a way, where it's like
they're structured that way.
loop mystery, if you will.
It reminds me of kind of something like Phoenix Wright, or a game like Ghost Trick, which well, Ghost Trick especially, because that does involve kind of time loop stuff. Every little game section, I mean, this could be a video game too, where you have to solve the mystery of the arc, and in that way it's also like Phoenix Wright, I guess. You got to solve the mystery, which is exactly what our character does. He plays it through as many times as he needs. In that way, it is extremely video game-esque. But I don't know, it's adapted pretty well. And the unique element they're able to have here is where in something like Dark Souls, where you have hollowing, that in metaphorical terms, it's just when you, the player, decide to give up. That's hollowing. In this case, we can see the psychological stress of the character, so we're able to see that and connect with it.
Of course, as well.
Yeah.
Something I forgot to bring up when I was talking about the abuse thing earlier, because there's a great moment where when he tries to tell, he like realizes, I can tell Amelia about what I'm experiencing. I don't have to do this alone.
Give it a try.
And then this fucking like time stops, and this swirling smoke like literally grips his heart, and he says that he is like immobilized by fear. It's like a fear that he feels on his soul. And again, it made me think about, like, you know, for people who are being abused, usually it's their fear of the consequences of speaking out, that like they'll get taken away from their parents or this or that, you know, like they can't, they feel like they can't speak out to people because of the fact that, you know, something that has been like made them afraid since they were so young that like they can't even move past that fear. You know, it's like primal, you know?
That metaphorical interpretation makes sense. I mean, I was confused when we see the time stop thing clearly happen when he's trying to tell her. And then, like, his reason for not continuing to talk is not like, whoa, time just stopped. It's that, oh, I feel fear. I mean, that's a weird mechanism to put in place as your reason why he can't tell. And, like, because the psychological trauma is, I guess, sort of the undercurrent of the whole series that he's dealing with. I get it on that sense. I'm still a little, I don't know, I want a more technical answer as to what the fuck he's talking about.
I definitely remember the first time I watched the show constantly feeling like I wanted a more technical answer for why these things are happening.
Yeah.
Like, because they just never explain magic. Like, there'll be...
They get to it a little bit more, but only in the substance.
I mean,
or
when
the
we get
surface.
into... this arc, like, really makes it clear that we are dealing with high-level magic in this series.
Yeah, for sure.
Which we tend to be in light novels, which is what I love about light novels. But, like, we've got the
There's only so much narrative weight a fireball blast can do.
Right. So we've got, like, the little magician lolly...
Beatrice. Yeah.
And we've also got the leader of the mansion... who is like a fucking clown man.
He's like the head magician of the kingdom or something.
They're both like ridiculous over-the-top characters with ridiculous over-the-top powers. And when they have like a magical throwdown, it's like, oh, this is going to be some like dimension-shifting shit, you know? Like, she's putting up barriers, she can like change locations of rooms, all kinds of like spatial powers. So like, we're at a point already where the magical powers are like, the only thing we really understand about them is who is stronger than who on the basis of who happens to walk away from the fight, you know?
Yep, that's all we can figure out.
So that is a little annoying, but, you know.
I assume it doesn't matter that much, and they'll explain whatever needs to be explained about that system. It was fun to learn that there is a magic system where there's 4 elements, but also light and shadow, and Subaru is shadow elemental. Whoa! Epic. Will that be used? Probably. I assume he'll learn some magic spells that involve that. Guess we'll find out.
Yeah, I had forgotten that he had magic, so I don't even remember if or what he does with it.
He needs, you know, when you got these time loop systems, you need to give your player character abilities that can persist over the time loop.
Right.
He can't physically get stronger, but any knowledge he obtains, and presumably like magic is like info in your brain.
Yeah.
That sort of thing could persist. So that's a power up you could get, I guess.
It's definitely mostly, like, I would say knowledge is power is the overall idea of this show. Is he's always trying to learn enough to get through the next cycle, and that'll come up more in later episodes for sure, as like situations get more complex. But yeah, let me look through my notes for a second here.
I had a thing to bring up.
Go for it.
Okay. Well, we haven't talked much about Rem and Ron specifically as characters who are like the two important ones of this whole arc. I mean, I don't really have that much to say, but I feel like you should carve out a little bit of time for them because they're the most popular ones in like the whole series and all of fucking anime for the last several years. So, okay, first of all, you got the whole twin factor, adorable. Yeah. I love their mirror match thing, and they do things together. They call each other by their names. It's cute. But then the thing that you don't really expect, I mean, because we already know that the series has them be so popular and so prominent, we know that they get fleshed out, but you don't expect that character archetype to be fleshed out as like the maid, the help. Right. And then, of course, despite being twins, as you were rightfully saying, they're very different. Yes. And they have massively different personalities and like utility in the story. Right. And so learning about that, it's kind of cool.
It's definitely like, this arc pitches it more like Rem and Ram. From now on, Rem is the only one who's really a main character. Like, Ram, because, I mean...
He goes on about how he loves, like, both of them equally, like, this whole time. He's like, I have to save both of them. They both held my hand. I love both of them. But he literally says, I love both of them at the end as he kills himself.
Frankly, Ram is fucking the guy who runs the mansion. Like, this is... Should we see her, like, on his chest and everything in this, like... So she's not on the table for his harem. And I think she makes that pretty clear to him. She's just like, okay. I'm like with the guy, you know, like he is my master. Rem is not fucking the guy. So she's available.
She's wide open.
Yeah, wide open for harem inclusion. So we'll really, I would say it's like almost more like this was the Rem and Ram arc and the next one is the Rem arc. Even though they're both relevant to it. But like, you know, and Ram is the one who I thought got really more fleshed out in this arc because she had more meaningful interactions with the main character. Where I feel like Rem, basically, she was on guard the whole time, and then she kills him, and like she basically reveals like, yeah, I never trusted you at all.
Right.
So that is still true. You know, like, that was, like, at the end of a line, unless, and I don't think he would have done anything to, like, alleviate this in the latest timeline, even if he has made it through the loop. It's just, like, you know, Ram, I think, I think she trusts him more than Rem does at this point.
I think that's true, yeah.
And, like, it sort of feels like we've already gone through the interactions she's going to have with him, which is more of, like, a big sister role of literally teaching him how to live, both in terms of, like, explaining why he needs to learn how to do things, teaching him how to do things, teaching him, like, how to, I don't know, like, mingle in a way. Like, I feel like the attitude that she has toward him is, like, you know, like, trying to help him out with, like, the way that he deals with other people, I guess. Rem is just kind of like a Rey clone at this point in the story. Like, she doesn't have much going on, you know?
That's true. Well, I don't know. I mean, switching gears a little bit, there's that story that's brought up about the whole blue Oni, red Oni thing. Yeah. And even before that, there's a weird moment where, I assume this matters to the lore, where the guy just says, I like demons, or I like Onis. Yeah. Because I don't say thank God, I say thank Satan, but Satan is Oni in my speech or whatever. Okay, fine. So, like, from that I'm deriving they must be literally Onis, like, in real life, but also hot girls. They are
literally the red Oni and the blue Oni. Like, they are them, but, you know.
Right, and then we hear the story. Not the
actual ones in the story, but their life story is the same story, so.
So then we're told, I guess I won't ask if they are, like, literally ogres. I'll let the story tell us as we go. But, so they tell us the story, the classic tale as old as time. There's two ways they could go on that. Either it's just the exact same story, and that's boring, or they do something different, in which case, why do they tell us the story? Right. So I'm just not that into... so they can
subvert the ending of it, so they can give it a happy ending.
You're right, that's the point.
Because she said it's a sad story, and he's like, yeah, I agree, I feel two ways about it. Ooh, let's resolve that tension in the next arc.
That'll be the nice little bow at the end of that arc. Yeah,
it is pretty dorky, though. Like, I mean, that was one of those moments where it's just like, yeah, maybe this show is for younger audiences to some extent. Like, we have to go through and explain this thing that's been explained.
They're doing that thing. You'd think any mature Japanese person, presumably, would not need it explained to them if all the signs are there in the narrative. And, like, they're literally red and blue, you know? You don't need it to be exposited at such lengths.
Yeah.
These characters clearly represent these things in, like, the most famous story in, like, Japanese history, or one of them.
Yeah.
But, again, I think it's for younger audiences. I mean, what age is the light novel targeted at? Like,
it definitely
12?
has, like, there's lots of moments of... There's a very melodramatic scene where when he runs away from the mansion and, like, when he's confronting Rem for the first time with the ball and chain. And it is just, like, it can be so melodramatic with the characters just, like, screaming and shouting about their emotions and all that.
Yeah.
And it's not so much that I disagree with the emotions themselves or the narrative. It's fine. It's just the amount of back and forth, the amount of, like, overtly stating and explaining the point over and over again.
Yeah, and I very much agree. And I think that, like, a lot of the criticism I would have of the show really comes down to, like, the direction. Like, and maybe, like, the editor. Like, just, you know, like I was saying last episode, cut out some of these lines of dialogue. I mean, they're not necessary.
I think
Tighten this whole project up.
I would have to blame, ultimately, just the source material. I have to assume is where, like, you know, most of the bulk of this is coming from. Like, I don't think they added anything in.
Yeah.
If anything, they probably left stuff out.
Probably.
Did they leave the wrong stuff out? I don't know. But, like, it's like... Because I think the directing is really strong. Like,
at times, for sure, yeah.
Like, the stupid fucking long exposition scenes, they try... Like, even the Red Ogre, Blue Ogre story, the visuals of that scene were nice to look at.
They were.
They were, like, really ridiculous.
They were
It's just,
so
like, a bunch
on the
of
nose.
red and blue
Everything's
contrasts.
red, everything's blue. We see, like, 4 or 5 different images that are... Okay, we get it. But, it kept you visually engaged, although as they were just expositing dialogue.
It suited the music really well.
Yeah.
And the music suited the story really well.
True art, because you look out at the sunset, the sun is setting, the red light rays are coming through, as the blue sky, it's like, oh, that makes sense, that fits the scene.
Yeah.
Very attractive, very, very nice. That's direction, that's good direction.
So, I just think it's just a problem of, like, man, if only it was just written somewhat more succinctly, you know?
But to that point, I want to give it a little bit of credit. Like, this block of episodes, despite the fact that they were more in, like, one specific location with, like, I don't know, it felt more of a closed loop. I actually felt less moments in this 4-episode block of being annoyed by, like... It actually kind of helped by the fact that it was a little more boring overall than the first 4, because lots more cool stuff happened in those 4-episode blocks, and the show distracted me by talking over them. That annoyed me more than things just being a bit more chill in general. And there was one time at the end where I think, as the characters are having one of their emotional, explosive things, I'm like, this scene is still going on after... I can't believe they're still talking about this in specifically vague, non-progressive terms. Just, they're using that anime speak where characters offer just enough information that they were specifically requested and not 1 inch more, which we as normal humans would, and would progress the plot and would clarify things and would absolve all tension. And it feels wrong because that's how humans talk. They're not acting like humans. They're acting like anime characters. And you never want that to happen.
I do think there's some level of the author, like, in his head going, okay, I'm going to make this this closed time loop. Like, what questions would need to be, like, what, like, if I did this and that failed, what would be the next question I would ask?
Right.
And then,
I agree.
And then instead of... Whereas you or I might think, like, okay, the character will ask this question, hit this dead end, and then they will ask the logical next question and hit the next dead end. He thinks, okay, first we'll have him have this question, explore that for a whole episode, and then he'll ask the next question in the next episode, and that's why it takes so long.
And at least, mercifully, there is an eye towards progress at all times. The show does not get distracted from what it's trying to do of, like, we need to solve this mystery, we're gonna, do XYZ along the road. It's just that it's when it comes to that, again, it's a directorial question. I guess it's a writing foundational question. It's about when you're doing each of those question and answer loops and how long it takes. you have to pace the amount of information for how long like that loop takes, and like weighing the right amount of information just in any mystery plot of any kind, really any storytelling. You can't just dump all information. It's about parsing it out in a satisfying way. It's finding that satisfying arc. That's kind of where the artistry lies, of keeping your audience feeling engaged properly. And I mean, I would argue that we're on the low side with this.
I think that the average audience member will probably, because those scenes are hype and tense, just have a natural tendency to keep up their sense of hype and tension through the scene.
Sure.
Just because, like, the music is still going, the characters are just screaming louder and louder, they're just whooshing the swords around louder and louder until finally the big, you know?
Yeah.
But it's like, that could be 2 minutes, and maybe 2 minutes feels short for you. But for me, if I reach that moment where the character says something I already thought they were going to say, like 3 sentences ago, then I'm going to lose attention. I'm just going to phase out at that moment.
I kind of weirdly feel like my criticisms I'm making here are the kinds I normally make when I watch something for the second time and I'm seeing through the cracks. But I feel like I'm doing that on the first watch because I have not seen this before. And again, I think it's just because, I guess, genre savviness, to suck my own dick a little bit.
Yeah, I wrote down designed for longevity. It definitely feels like, because at first my argument before had been maybe the author is low IQ and therefore he has to process through this at the same rate as Subaru. Now I'm more like, no, I think he just wanted it to last. Like, I think he was like, let's pace this motherfucker to last as long as humanly possible because I am confident in this story. This is my guy. My horse will race, goddamn.
And for people who put it on in the background, maybe turn on the dub and aren't sitting there hanging on the next word waiting for like the next block of animation to wow them in a new and exciting way, it just kind of exists in the background, then I'm sure it does that job just fine. But it's the people who are just, you know, not to overdo it, but like examining a little more closely and kind of hanging on it. And we tried watching the dub, couldn't do it, can't stand it. I don't know if I'm just allergic to dubs now across the board. There's got to be some good ones out there, but I've yet to find them in any of this kind of like seasonal anime stuff. But
not that I think I would say that the performances, even in Japanese, I liked Ram when she was freaking out over Rem being dead. I liked Subaru. I think Subaru's got a pretty good voice performance overall. He's really
going all out. I mean, he's got a lot of range to cover, and he does it. So I respect it.
But Rem, her dramatic scene when she was killing him, I thought was just like underacted and.
Because she's a kudere, you know. She's got a
maybe she'll win me over.
She's gonna transition from kudere to tsundere one of these days, and then to full. What's the normal one?
Kundere.
No, that's not it. That's not it at all.
For when you got the kuni.
More like the poondere.
The poondere.
That's the final frontier. Anyway, that's all I've got to say. I mean, what do you think about the arc? Where are we going?
You know, I liked the part where he killed himself.
Yeah.
I made this
I'm looking forward to that arc in my own life.
Yeah. I made that video, Death is My Best Friend, about the metaphorical idea of killing yourself, experiencing ego death as a means of moving forward. Like, basically being like, I've gone as far as I can being the person I am now, so I need to, like, become somebody different to move to the next phase. And I think Subaru is, like, you know, you do that naturally by just learning and growing, but Subaru has to literally be like, I am going to end my life so that I can be reborn as the person who can solve this scenario, you know? And so he makes that leap and fucking... It's gross.
Despite despite it going on a little bit long, all the emotive parts, well, I wouldn't say all, but many of them hit in the way they intended to, even if the road there is a little bit bumpy.
The point is made, the experience is just not as gratifying as maybe...
Yeah, and something that was, I don't know.
It's like if I watch like Fooly Cooly, it's like I'm going to get the same amount of messaging in 6 episodes at breakneck speed, and every image is going to be seared into my mind forever. There are images in this show that are seared into my mind. I remembered most of what happened in these first 2 arcs, There was definitely some stuff I fucking totally forgot about the magic shit and like all the crazy high level fucking.
I don't know
spells and all
how
that.
much that's gonna matter ultimately.
Yeah.
Is the fear that may have been a total waste of a scene. Subaru
There's
will probably
definitely-
get magic.
I mean, we're
but
definitely gonna see like way more magic use. I just forgot that it had been in that arc or that it was like that crazy level of magic. You know,
that was a great scene. That was a great scene.
but yeah, it's like the highlights are there. The story hits the right beats. Again, it's just not very like witty or clever, you know, and that's fine. Ultimately, if you're somebody who cares about stories more for just the themes and the emotive core of it, this might be a better show for you. If if you don't care about the fact that it's like generic looking waifu trash otaku shit, you know.
A lot of people come for that specifically,
Right,
and if there's
exactly.
something decent behind it, all the better.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's all I have to say about these episodes.
They were all right. I am curious what's going to happen next. I want to know how this arc ends, the little mystery that we've set up. Like to see it resolved. Want to know what's the deal with Subaru? Why is he here? Why does he keep resetting? I'm a little curious as to like the rules of how it works exactly. Those are going to be a little bit arbitrary, so I can't give the author like too much. They're just going to be whatever worked for the plot. But yeah, I mean, I'd like to see what happened next, and we're going. So I hope he continues to do good stuff and it doesn't get boring. Guess we'll find out.
And you'll find out what we talk about in our bonus episode we're about to record when you subscribe to the KHANTEHNT Subscribe Star for $10 at least.
Bonus episodes, everybody. More coming in the future, but also one now. So we'll see you there. Subscribestar.com/KHANTEHNT. See you soon. Bye.